This is New Rural Virginia, reclaiming rural leadership through conversation featuring real voices, real issues from the heart of the Commonwealth. Y'all, we are so thankful to have you with us. Welcome back to New Rural Virginia Podcast. I'm Parson Brown.
And I'm Larry Wohlers, and we are your podcast hosts. So, Parson, we've had some unusual things happen on our podcast, but this may be a first. We actually had to literally pull you out of the river just to get you in here.
Yeah, that is true. That's because I'm working on this beautiful film project, actually. It's kind of like an ode to the Shenandoah. It's called River Maid. And yes, in this story, there is a mermaid in the Shenandoah River.
A mermaid? Is she running for the state legislature by chance?
Well, mermaids don't really run anywhere, Larry.
Got it. Fair enough.
But no, so like it's a really great project. I've been working out there all week. I've got to splash around with all these really talented Virginia filmmakers.
Okay.
And we had a big old mermaid tail in the water, and then I had to hightail it down the holler to get back to my microphone to be here with you.
Well, you know, it's a shame we're just an audio podcast because the image of you dripping wet would really increase our viewership.
Nobody needs that. But yeah, so it's a great project. Quick little plug for anybody that's interested. The folks at Miranda Pictures would love your support. I'll drop a link in our notes, in the episode notes.
Absolutely. And while you're clicking around, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to New Rural Virginia, our podcast, and we're on Spotify, iHeart, Apple, Amazon, all the usual places.
Yep. And of course, our Substack newsletter, The Rural Angle.
Absolutely. You can find us at newruralva.org.
Yeah. So anyway, I am extremely glad to be back in time because our next guest has some deeply relevant information for rural voters, like the kind of insights that are going to be crucial to the future of the Commonwealth.
That's right. Well, now that Parson's dried off, you have dried off, right, Parson?
I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Good. We are really honored to welcome Delegate Josh Thomas from House District 21 to the show. He's got a lot to tell us, so let's dive right in. We've got some important news for you. Josh, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Larry. Parson, I appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Yes, indeed. Now, you know, like so many candidates that we've talked to, you've got an amazing background of public service. You joined the Marine Corps, served in Afghanistan, came back to study law at William & Mary, a great place. That's where my son went to school, too.
I love that.
Then during COVID, you joined the Virginia Medical Reserve Corps. So a lot to service in there, but not much that suggested politics in that resume. What led you to become a delegate?
You know, not me. I was just kind of living my best life as an attorney, and I got a phone call out of the blue from a sitting delegate. He said, "Hey, I'm so-and-so. Would you ever consider running? There's an open seat in your area." And I said, "No, that sounds terrible." And I'm right. To this day, I was right. My initial assessment was correct. It is absolutely terrible. But as I have learned, and as you understand how the story goes, I did eventually say yes. And I'll tell you why. So whether, if you are religious or believe in a higher power, it could be that, or if you call it fate. But in the week that I said I would call this person back and make a decision, the family that lived to the right of us and to the left of us, and keep in mind, this is during COVID, so some people are deemed essential employees, some are not. And these two families were both deemed non-essential employees, so they couldn't work, they couldn't go to their jobs. And so they were eventually either in one case evicted, or in the other case, they just left on their own accord, but not to a positive housing situation. And so I sat there and thought, wow, this is the second economic calamity my millennial generation has been through. The first one, I was obligated to join the Marine Corps right after college. So it's not like I can just stop and go serve and fix this problem. But here, now I'm an attorney. I'd like to think I know a couple things about the world. And I have this position being not necessarily offered, but motivated to seek, where I actually can do something about it. And so I said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. But I want to make housing and affordability are my number one and two issues. And I want to be able to say whatever I want. They were like, okay. And 2 years later, here I am.
Wow. No, and really, that's quite a compliment to have somebody call and reach out to you.
In all of our conversations with the other candidates, the fear of what these GOP budget cuts are going to be doing to our health care, SNAP, et cetera, is very real. And most of these programs are administered by the states. And of course, Washington just provides the money. So when the feds stop funding, the legislature has to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
So you've been a part of the committee that's been looking at that real world impact on Virginia. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So there's a lot to, how does the federal government impact you? So there's a lot to unpack there. I think it's best to kind of frame what the committee is and what it is not. So the committee was created by the Speaker of the House. It is a House committee, and it's charged with having several meetings to then look at the impacts of both the federal reductions in funding and then also the federal firings of the federal employees and kind of the impact on contractors to a certain degree. And kind of get our arms around all that data and then present that data with a kind of a limited set of recommendations to our, what we would call our money committees. So House appropriations, and then those that are responsible for appropriating the Virginia budget. Virginia budget's around, depending on the year, $80 to $90 billion. I'll just give you the bottom line up front and then kind of go into some detail. But the bottom line up front we got from the appropriation staff and the staff of the committee is that Virginia is looking at about a $2 billion loss in federal funding, which is a lot. Billion with a B, billion with a B, Larry.
That's a lot of money.
We came to that discovery after 5 meetings, February, April, May, June, and August throughout the Commonwealth. I mean, we were in Wolfville, we were in lots of different places, Richmond, Northern Virginia. And framing the problem, I think, is that 24% of Virginia's economy relies on federal spending. We were able to deduce from economists down at ODU and the Norfolk State, then also UVA. I mean, they were very helpful throughout the process. And in addition to that, when we talk about federal firings, $26 billion we learn is spent on federal employee wages. And for any of your listeners that might be outside of Virginia, we did not know this at the committee, but Virginia is second to California for just the raw number of federal employees located within a state. And then we're right after Maryland for kind of the proportion of that state labor force that's in the federal government. So I think Maryland sits around 13%. And we're at 10%. So 1 in 10 directly impacted by federal or the threat of federal firings. And then we also found out that for every federal worker, you can safely say, because some said it was a higher number, but I just want to give you conservative with little c estimates. For every federal job loss, that's 2 contractors. So if 10% of Virginia's workforce is federal, then 30% could be impacted by significant cuts. But so this will be kind of ongoing requirements to fill these gaps. And so I think my colleagues across the aisle kept saying throughout the committee process that, well, we banked away $900 million through budget cuts from last year and other funds. And we can, have that discussion. But at the end of the day, let's just say it is $900 million. That's just for 1 year. That's right. Most of those funds are non-replicable for the next year and the year after that. So come fiscal year 27, we're up a creek.
So did the size of that shortfall surprise you? That it was $2 billion?
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. I mean, the budget's around 80 to 90 million, depending on the year. And to have $2 billion of that suddenly gone, and also in some of those critical areas. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you live in rural Virginia or urban Virginia or suburban or exurban Virginia. I mean, there is negative impact to all of our families from the Big Beautiful Bill's impact on.
So, Delegate, current projections are that as many as 350,000 Virginians could eventually lose their health care coverage because of cuts to Medicaid and the ACA. And then there are the certain increases in health care premiums for the rest of us. Donna Littlepage, she's a candidate in HD40 and a real expert in healthcare. And she told us that these cuts will overwhelm the state's ability to respond. Could you tell us a bit about why that is?
Yeah. So instead of saying Big Beautiful Bill over and over again for simplicity, I'm just going to say HR1, which is the actual naming convention for seismic change in all of our lives that's about to happen. So if you're looking at just say Medicaid from HR, a couple things change that are going to cause people to lose coverage or be in enduring hardship from a healthcare perspective. So one, they're changing the eligibility requirements to now occur every 6 months. for the Medicaid expansion population. For those of you who don't know, Virginia expanded Medicaid a couple years before I came on the scene.
Right.
Glad we did that. Big success for Democrats. That was under Governor.
Yep.
For that population, the eligibility is now going to occur much faster. That is going to cause the workload for DMAS and other local DSS offices to dramatically increase. So the costs of administering the program are going to increase, and the number of people that are getting rotated on and off is going to increase as well at a higher frequency, which is going to cause more economic stress in families. Another thing it did is it's going to require the Medicaid expansion population to participate in work, community service, or education programs, I believe to the tune of about 80 hours per month. Again, higher workload on the state to be able to administer that, but that's going to be kind of difficult for some people that might be experiencing healthcare problems to meet that. The bill's not particularly clear on exemptions or things like that. And so that's going to have an impact, again, on expansion hospital assessment and federal matching funds. So, I mean, there's going to be a cost there as well. Another thing is it's going to require copays for Medicaid expansion enrollees with incomes above 100% of the federal poverty level. I haven't looked lately, but for those that don't know, the federal poverty level is very low. So 100% is doubling that. You're talking about people that still haven't entered the 30,000s or 40,000s, right? Like the median income, I believe in America for a family or a household is, I think, in the 50s or 60s. In Northern Virginia, where I represent, it's in the 80s. So to see that this is going to impact the vast majority of low income Americans, which is, so it's like, congratulations, you're still on the program, but you're going to pay a lot more if you weren't just indeed outright kicked off. The other policy changes, I mean, let's talk about hospital payments. I mean, that's something that affects particularly rural areas, whether you're a hospital or like a clinic. So in Virginia, we've got 63 private acute care hospitals that are taxed at 6% of their net patient revenue in Virginia. And this is used to fund Virginia's share of Medicaid expansion. So it's $650 million per year, or 2% of the tax. Then this is currently what's happening. So it provides for a higher Medicaid reimbursement rate for hospital services, about $1 billion per year, or 4% of the tax. That's how you get to 6. The policy change from HR 1 is that effective on October 1st, 2027, very cute date that they did there, through September 30th, 2032, HR 1 is going to require a reduction in this tax by 0.5%, so half a point, if you will, per year until it reaches 3.5%. And then come July 2028, it's going to reduce the existing Medicaid payments for services by 10% a year till payments are equal to 100% of the Medicare rate. So what is all that kind of gobbledygook? I mean, if you're a Medicaid nerd, you're like, yeah, I got you, delegate. But for like, what is the average person? What did I just say? So there's a couple of impacts. One, the reduction in the provider tax is not expected to impact Virginia's ability to fund its share of the Medicaid expansion program. So like, if there is a silver lining, it's that the expansion population is not as at risk. I mean, keep in mind, I just said the look is going to happen a lot more. So they're going to be cycling on and off this thing a lot faster. But the reduction in the provider tax will impact hospital revenues. And then particularly, and the committee also found that particularly for hospitals that operate at a loss, see generally a lot of rural hospitals, and rely on the redistribution of hospital resources through a provider tax. So, I mean, it literally said, I can remember in one of the slides, like this is going to impact the Rural Health Transformation Program, if I'm saying that right. So, I mean, the committee even had a particular note about the impact to rural healthcare.
Yeah, I think a lot of our rural voters don't hear it in, in regular neighbor to neighbor terms.
Yeah. So just to clarify, make sure I understand this. What I'm hearing, I think, is a triple whammy. On the one hand, it's going to cost the state more money to administer these programs. And then there's less money coming in to fund coverage for people. And then the third whammy is that the hospitals will be getting less money to cover the actual cost of care.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right, Larry. And I will give you one final whammy, which is those that are receiving healthcare insurance. The HR 1 also did not extend the premium tax credit for health insurance. So everyone's health insurance, well, not everyone's, but
Right.
a large number of particularly low income folks, and particularly folks that are in rural Virginia where your employer may have had you get insurance on the exchange because maybe they're a 14-man outfit or 30-man outfit. I mean, we got a lot of great small businesses out in rural Virginia, and my district included, on the half that is rural, where having a standard employee benefits program doesn't make economic sense, and that's okay.
Right.
So they encourage their employees to get healthcare on the exchange. Well, without this premium tax credit, you're looking at your health insurance rates going up dramatically.
Right.
It's hard to do like a for example yet. I can tell you right now, Virginia was told in this brief, you could cover the cost for that and make sure that no one feels that, but it is going to cost the state $250 million every year.
Wow. So I can only imagine when you and the committee were sitting there in Richmond and looking at these results, it must have been a pretty depressing meeting.
I mean, it was depressing because for those of us that have followed the budget closely, there are all these things that we were thinking about that were almost equivalent in dollar terms that are now going to have to get tossed out, or likely to get tossed out. Like, I can't speak for the Appropriations Committee, but I mean, take for example, I don't know if you're familiar with the child support gap in public education. But, 2008, 2009, during the economic crisis, we kind of capped basically what we as a Commonwealth were going to do budget wise on helping out support staff. Well, if you've got a large population like we in Prince William do of new Americans and new Virginians that need help with language access in school, like that's painful. There's also special education that applies to a lot of rural areas where you don't have the density or the critical mass of students in order to get certain care. And so this dreaded cap is holding you back. Well, this budget this year, Democrats were actually able to make the numbers work to get rid of the support cap. Well, if next year, and that cost around $250 million, next year might have to swap that just to make sure people are going to be able to have health care for another year, let alone get a quality education, let alone special education students in rural Virginia get access to the basic needs that they have. So really, really tough decisions forced upon us by the Trump administration.
Right.
So on that note, can we move into to talk about SNAP? For the first time in history, over 1 million Virginians are food insecure. So we've got 8 in 10 of the localities with the highest rates of food insecurity are in rural areas, and it's getting worse. Rising food costs are putting nearly half, like 45% of Virginians into debt. That's according to a new poll from No Kid Hungry Virginia. Yet these Trump cuts will add hundreds of millions to the state burden to finance SNAP. So what are we going to do?
Well, yeah. So again, giving you the numbers. So SNAP, I'll break it out into two things. One is the cost of the program, and then one is the cost to administer the program. First thing we were briefed on is no matter what we do, no matter what actions we take, it's going to cost Virginia around $90 million to administer the program. The government used to pay for that. HR 1 changed that. So basically increases the state's administrative costs for SNAP by 25%. So they're shifting basically a portion of that onto the states. And Virginia's number is going to be 90 million. So that's like something new you got to find in the budget to afford. Now we get to the actual, the funds. Like Larry, you kind of started the program talking about how a lot of money for federal programs is handed to the states for them to administer. And it's really just kind of a pass, if you will. So what HR 1 did and what the Trump administration is doing is they establish a new SNAP state matching requirement that's actually based on the state's error rate. So the current status quo is that there is no state match required. Now there's going to be one. Virginia's error rate is currently around 11.5%. That's not outlandish. It's not perfect. There are states that have better ones, but it's not like we're really messing up or anything like that. So for fiscal year 2028, the budget staff told us that would be around $270 million. So already from the quick 6 minutes that we've been talking between healthcare and feeding children, we're already getting close to $600 million. We're getting close to $700 million. And so that also doesn't even take into account the expansion of work requirements for those that participate in the SNAP program. They're extending the age range to individuals 18 to 64, and then lowering dependent exemption to children under 14. They are eliminating some work requirements for a few folks. So I will, again, trying to give you a both strikes analysis. But I mean, just an immense hit to the state budget to make sure that we feed people.
It's daunting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and also let's think about I'll just throw in my own experience here in the private sector. My day job is I'm a commercial real estate attorney. So I help developers build housing or build a shopping center, or build a small country store. I've done all of it. And now with the lack of access here for SNAP, this is going to have so many secondary and tertiary effects on rural economies. Yes, the hospital might close. Those jobs will disappear. Those people spending at the local store will disappear. Then the local store will disappear. And then SNAP will disappear. And then there's no place to even use your SNAP benefits if you do have them. And if you don't have them, now you're paying market rate. So you can't afford as much. Just immense amount of misery is going to be wrought on rural Virginia, which has so much potential because I've seen it. And it just pains me.
After healthcare, public education, that's the largest portion of the state's budget. We've got fundamental responsibility to educate our kids. But at the same time, federal money has really made a difference in education. So what do these cuts mean for our kids' education?
Yeah, so it's my understanding that there is a funding pause in some cases, but there's still current federal appropriating going on right now. So not everything was handled in HR 1. So there's still work to be done at the federal level. So I can't tell you exactly what, or at least we didn't get a brief on exactly what had been removed yet on K through 12. But what I can tell you in the dueling proposals between the House and the Senate as of the brief that we received, which was on September 11th. So the House proposal, the House Republican proposal, would overall reduce federal support for K through 12 by about 27%, which comes out to about $9.9 billion. If you've got a Title I school in your area, and there are a few rural areas that have those, just as there are urban areas that have those, that funding is going to get reduced by 34%, or about $4.7 billion. And to give you an idea,
extremely important.
Yeah, and to give you an idea of some of the programs that, again, House Republicans want to eliminate, programs that support effective instruction, like classroom instruction, English language acquisition, adult education, literacy, anything for migrant students. Another one that I come from the development space is a lot of rural areas, their localities did not keep up with the need for housing. And so there is what I will call a hidden homeless population. Suburban and urban areas, you can kind of see a coalescence of homeless population, but in rural areas, man, it is hard to see sometimes because there's lots of places for folks to kind of live off the land or outside, but
very good point.
We should be living in. And so one of the K through 12 removals is stuff for homeless students. So
really?
Yeah. So again, just completely ignoring some of the specific issues that rural areas deal with. Now, on the Senate proposal, they maintain a lot of the general level of support that you saw in fiscal year 2025. They don't reduce or eliminate many programs, but they do include provisions requiring the administration to release a formula of grants that they want on a certain timeline. So pretty drastic differences. I don't know where they're all going to shake out. And so that's just something to follow there. On the higher education side, that was a little more cut and dry in many ways because of a lot of the grant funding that was cut.
Right. And that was funding they just mostly rescinded, right?
Yeah, rescinded or started tinkering with long-standing programs. So we've got a lot of, and I've got some in my district, we've got a lot of bright kids out there that, but for the cost of higher education, could get a great degree from tech or somewhere and come back home. They want to come back home with this degree.
100%.
Yeah, and it might be in advanced agriculture. It might have nothing to do with agriculture, but it's something that every town needs. It could be the nurse. It could be the physician's assistant or something like that. And so HR 1 changed a lot of our funding sources for our students. So let me first talk about Pell Grant eligibility. A lot of people use Pell Grants a great except. Some positives, it expands eligibility for some workforce programs. So that might actually help a few folks in rural areas. But it does exclude students now who have a student aid index greater than or equal to twice the maximum Pell Grant award for program participation, which is about $14,000. So that's going to freeze out a lot of people. And then this exclusion impacts families with adjusted gross income of about $95,000 with one dependent, all the way up to $125,000 if you got 4 dependents. Under the previous methodology, it dropped off about 70 to 80,000. So you're going to see families not qualifying for these that used to. And so that's going to have a really negative impact on folks' access to to higher education. Something else that we've seen a lot of kids be able to go to college in an area and then come back to where they're from was because of borrowing and student loans. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a millennial. We were right in the crosshairs of the student loan crisis, right?
Yes,
so
indeed, yeah.
I don't know if caps on borrowing in general are a terrible idea. I'm not here to say that you shouldn't do that. I just don't know if I would have gone with these caps, because some of these caps seem to be kind of boxing out a lot of kids that come from rural areas, or if you're in an urban area that might be a low income area. So basically what HR 1 did is it established some basically several aggregate annual limits on federal student loans, including a lifetime cap of $257,500 for students. So, I mean, that means that now if you're able to finance let's say you go to tech and get an advanced agricultural degree, and then you decide that after a while you're pretty good at stuff and you want to be a lawyer and maybe do some land deals on the side, I mean, just generating great economic activity in your area, well, you can't finance that anymore because you'll probably hit the cap when you get to law school amount, right? So you're really freezing kids out of professional schools too. And then caps the Parent Plus program. I mean, members of my own family have used that, $20K a year and then $65K in the aggregate. And then it eliminates the Grad Plus loan program and then caps graduate education borrowing at $20,500 per year, and $100,000 aggregate for graduate students. So, I mean, we are just looking at some serious boxing out for folks to be able to educate themselves in the way that they want to. Yeah, it's going to be really tough for kids.
Yeah, and we're already having difficulty keeping our young, keeping people here, keeping our young people here, and giving them incentive to return to our rural communities.
Yeah, so it eliminates the Grad Plus program, and it was reported to us that 2,350 in-state graduate and professional students used $55 million last year through the Grad Plus program. So that's $55 million in investment in our children's future that's now just not accessible for anybody.
And I think one thing that strikes me is the real reduction in the Pell Grants. Even the in-state tuition for Virginia colleges is not nothing, right? And it's a fair amount for people to pay, and losing access to some of those Pell Grants is going to make a difference.
The ability for folks to move and come back, I think, is going to be really negatively impacted, because now it's like, okay, I can get the right amount of loans, I can go to my school, I can get a good degree that's going to have a high ROI for me, and I can come back to my home in Southwest Virginia. But now it's like, okay, well, I can't go now to Virginia Tech. I can't go to the in-state school. So I guess I'll just not go to college now. Or if I have parents who really, really concerned about that, they're just going to leave Southwest Virginia. They're going to go to a place where they earn higher wages. Now, cost of living might be higher, but they might be able to figure out a way. Some of those middle markets that we have, Hampton Roads is a great example where people can do things like that. And so I think you're going to see it's going to cause a further flight from Southwest Virginia, just when we had figured out so many different great industries, great economic development wins in Southwest Virginia to really bring a lot of places back. And so that's the other thing that's just incredibly painful about this. HR 1 got rid of a lot of grants. It's hard to know how many because they're not very transparent about it. But some of the grants that we're able to see and were able to be reported to us were some of the larger ones. So one of them, and I mean, there were a bunch, but I'm just really going to focus on the ones that would impact rural Virginia. I think we just saw from the devastation of the hurricane that climate change is something that's real, and it affects us, and affects us in very painful and expensive ways. So there was the Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities grant, the BRIC program through FEMA, and that was canceled. And that allocated grants to states and localities for mitigation projects that would prevent harm to humans and avoid economic losses from floods, wildfires, the things that rural Virginians have to deal with much more than, say, folks in Arlington or Alexandria. And that was a $750 million program nationwide. That's another one from the EPA was there were $2 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act to help keep communities funding their projects that reduce pollution. We've got so many beautiful rural communities that maybe were done a little wrong by certain industries 40, 50, 60 years ago that are coming back now, revitalized, found a different industry that doesn't pollute. And these funds were designed to help them do that.
Yeah, that's something I'm hearing from a lot of folks, throughout Southwestern Virginia. And you're right, we've got folks that are now trying to transform these areas that might be impacted by legacy pollution and trying to revitalize areas that were done wrong in the past. And that's really unfortunate to hear.
Yeah, and then let's talk about, and Larry, I've had this conversation about schools in rural areas and teacher retention. So there's another grant called Supporting Effective Educator Development, and another one, Teacher Quality Partnership, both canceled, both used to train teachers for the workforce in high need schools. A large portion of that, rural schools. And in February, the administration canceled that $600 million grant across the nation.
Wow. Really tough.
Yeah.
And as I listen to you, one of the things that strikes me that the challenge for you folks who are in Richmond, on the one hand, the state of Virginia is always fiscally prudent state. We have a great credit rating,
Yes.
And that's important. If you have a good credit rating, you can borrow at lower rates and so on. On the other hand, you have to now deal with a fundamentally changed relationship with the federal government, a federal government that's not going to play its role. And so you're going to be stuck with saying, well, what do we do? How do we support our residents and yet maintain our fiscally prudent stance? And it's going to be really hard, isn't it?
It's going to be hard, but I think there's something that everyday Virginians, particularly in rural areas, can do about it. That is hold your elected officials accountable. Mm-hmm. If your elected officials are not talking about some of the recommended programs or some of the recommendations of this committee and what the state could do, you need to hold them accountable. You can do that in many ways. The best way you can hold them accountable is to not vote for them if they will not talk to you about this. If you are in a rural area and you're represented, I don't care what party, if you're represented by somebody in rural Virginia and they are not actively out there fighting to get this grant money back to you, fighting to get the state to make sure that they fund some of these things in lieu of the federal government so that your town survive, then you need to replace. You need to do what Republicans were talking about, Obamacare, all the time. You need to repeal and replace. You need to bring that delegate or that state senator, well, not this year, but later. But this year, you need to bring that delegate home and replace them with somebody who will. I can tell you, I've had a lot of conversations with Democrats that are running in rural Virginia right now. They understand these topics. They understand them well. And they're out there talking to people about the importance of sticking up for rural Virginia and making sure that the state takes care of them. And that's how you make your voice heard. And so that's just what I hope folks will do, because rural Virginia is a beautiful place with a lot of potential, with good, hardworking folks that are currently getting done dirty by their state elected officials out in the Southwest, by their federal government. And I really hope folks will send a message that they won't put up for it, because I know they won't.
Yeah, beautifully said. And what we've found too is that we've got so many different talented people from all different backgrounds, but every single one of them that we've talked to in particular, like what they know better than anything is their community, because they listen to their constituents. They're hearing from folks on the ground, on the front lines in these rural communities.
Yeah, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been a great discussion. We've learned a lot. It's not the most uplifting discussion, but the fact that you understand the issues, that's the first place to start, right? We have to understand and talk honestly about what the challenges are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to be able to frame the problem to solve the problem.
And it matters. It matters. We've been saying this all along, that this is the most important state election in Virginia in a generation, because the folks that we're going to elect have to find a way to chart a new course, because at least for now, we don't necessarily have a reliable partner in Washington. Would that be fair, a fair assessment?
No, absolutely. The federal government in many ways is currently working to make your family less economically viable, sicker, less healthy, and less successful. So the state's going to have to step in to defend the Virginia family, and you need to make sure that your representative there is fighting for you.
Okay. Well, Josh, we will watch your campaign with interest.
I appreciate it, fellas.
Going into the last month.
That's right. Knocking on doors.
Exciting moment. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Delegate Thomas.
Yep.
Yes, thank you so much. And for our listeners, be sure and follow Josh is doing. You can find his website at jetforva.com. So thank you again.
And of course, don't forget to vote, Virginia.
That's right. We are 1 month away.
New Rural Virginia Candidate Spotlight is a production of New Rural Virginia. Visit newruralva.org for more. Produced and co-hosted by Larry Wohlers and yours truly, Parson Brown. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode.